Right now, your brain is changing. Not next year, not someday in the future. Right now. Every thought you think, every habit you repeat, every moment you spend on autopilot is either keeping your brain young or quietly aging it. Most people believe the brain gets old because time passes. That's a comforting lie. Because if time were the enemy, nothing could be done. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. The brain doesn't age from years. It ages from routine, from predictability, from a life lived without mental challenge. That's why some people seem mentally tired at 30, while others stay sharp, curious, and alive well into their 70s. Same years, very different minds. Here's something no one warns you about. Mental aging doesn't arrive with symptoms. There's no alarm, no sudden collapse. It happens quietly, when you stop learning, when you stop moving, when your days start blending together. One day you realize you're distracted. Another day you can't focus. Then slowly you stop asking questions altogether. That's not maturity. That's mental decline. And the most dangerous part? It feels normal. Because everyone around you is aging the same way. Scrolling more, thinking less, reacting instead of observing. But your brain was never designed for this. It was designed to adapt, to explore, to grow. And when it doesn't, it begins to shut things down. Memory, focus, emotional balance. Not because you're old, but because you've stopped using your brain the way it was meant to be used. In this video, you're going to learn how to reverse that process, how to protect your mind before decline feels permanent. Because a young brain isn't about motivation. It's about how you live every single day. Habit 1. Curiosity over comfort. The first rule to keep your brain young.
The important thing's not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. Albert Einstein, after listening to the truth about mental aging, one question should be forming in your mind. Why do some people stay mentally sharp for life, while others slowly fade, even though they're healthy? The answer begins here. With curiosity, curiosity is not a personality trait. It is not something you either have or don't have. It is a daily choice. When you were younger, your brain was constantly expanding, not because you were smarter, but because everything was new. New questions, new experiences, new challenges. Your brain was building connections nonstop. Then something changed. Life became familiar. Routines replaced exploration. Answers replaced questions. And slowly, your brain stopped stretching. Comfort feels safe. But neurologically said, comfort is dangerous because the brain grows only when it is challenged, when it is curious, when it is slightly uncomfortable. This is why curiosity is the first habit of mental youth. When you stop asking why, your brain stops adapting. When you stop learning, your brain starts pruning connections. It no longer needs. That's not failure, that's efficiency. The brain is ruthless that way. If you don't use certain pathways, it shuts them down. Curiosity tells your brain, this still matters. Think about the people who feel mentally old. They often say the same things. I've seen it all. There's nothing new. I already know how this ends. Those are not statements of wisdom. They are signals of mental closure. And mental closure is the beginning of decline. Now, contrast that with people who stay sharp well into old age. They read, they ask, they explore unfamiliar ideas, not because they need to, but because their brain expects growth. Curiosity keeps neural circuits alive. It activates attention, memory, and emotional engagement all at once. This is why boredom feels draining. Your brain isn't tired. It's understimulated. But here's the key distinction. Curiosity is not endless consumption. Scrolling endlessly is not curiosity. Watching mindless content is not curiosity. True curiosity requires effort, requires you to lean into what you don't understand, to stay present when things feel complex, to resist the urge for quick conclusions. That effort is what keeps the brain young. So how do you practice curiosity in real life? You start small, read something slightly outside your beliefs, ask deeper questions in conversations, learn how something works instead of accepting it at face value. Most importantly, stop rushing to answers. A curious brain lives longer in the question because questions create movement, and movement is life. In the next chapter, we'll talk about the second habit that keeps the brain young, because curiosity creates desire to grow, but movement is what gives the brain the energy to do it. Habit 2, daily movement for cognitive longevity, how physical motion keeps the brain young. Movement is a medicine for creating change in a person's physical, emotional, and mental states. Carol Welch. Curiosity awakens the mind. But curiosity alone is not enough. A curious brain still needs fuel. And that fuel comes from movement. After curiosity, movement is the most underestimated habit for keeping the brain young. Most people think of exercise as something you do for the body, weight, muscle, appearance. But long before it shapes the body, movement shapes the brain. Your brain depends on motion to survive. Every time you move your body, blood flow increases. Oxygen delivery improves. New neural connections are stimulated. This is not motivation, this is biology. A motionless body sends a dangerous signal to the brain. It says there is no need to adapt. And when the brain stops adapting, it starts conserving. Memory weakens, focus fades, mental energy drops. This is why a sedentary life often leads to a sedentary mind. Not immediately, but gradually. People don't notice the decline because it feels normal. They feel foggy, distracted, mentally tired. They assume it's stress or age, but often it's inactivity. Your brain was designed in motion. For most of human history, thinking happened while walking. Problem solving happened while moving. Creativity happened during physical effort. Stillness came only after exhaustion. Today, it's reversed. We sit all day, we think less, and then we wonder why the mind feels dull. Movement restores the natural order. And here's the important part. You don't need intense workouts. The brain doesn't care about gym memberships. It cares about consistency, walking daily, stretching, light resistance, even deliberate posture changes. These small movements stimulate areas of the brain responsible for learning and memory. In fact, studies consistently show that regular movement increases the size of the hippocampus, the part of the brain involved in memory formation. That's not anti-aging marketing. That's measurable brain growth. But there's something even deeper happening. Movement improves mood, and mood influences cognition. When you move, your brain releases chemicals that reduce stress and sharpen focus. This means you're not just keeping your brain young structurally, you're keeping it emotionally balanced. And emotional balance preserves mental youth. This is why people who move regularly often feel mentally lighter. They recover faster from stress. They think more clearly. They react less impulsively. Movement gives the brain resilience. But here's where most people fail. They wait for motivation. They tell themselves they'll move when they feel energized. That never works. Movement creates energy, not the other way around. A young brain moves first and feels better later. So make movement non-negotiable, not extreme, not perfect, daily. Tie it to something you already do. Walk after meals. Stretch in the morning. Move when your mind feels stuck. Because when your body moves, your brain remembers how to stay alive. In the next chapter, we'll explore the third habit, because movement prepares the brain, but learning is what keeps it expanding. Habit 3, learn what challenges you, not what entertains you. The secret to a younger brain. Intellectual growth should commence at birth and cease only at death. Albert Einstein. Movement gives the brain energy, but energy without direction fades quickly. What keeps the brain young long-term is learning, not passive learning, not entertainment disguised as knowledge, but learning that challenges you. The brain thrives on difficulty. Every time you try to understand something unfamiliar, your brain is forced to build new connections. That process is called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is youth. But here's the problem. Modern life has replaced learning with consumption. We watch more than we think. We scroll more than we study. We collect information without processing it. It feels productive, but it isn't. Your brain doesn't grow from exposure. It grows from effort. Effort is the missing ingredient. Think about how your brain feels after watching hours of content. Tired, foggy, restless. Now think about how it feels after deeply learning something new. Engaged, alert, quietly energized. That difference matters because the brain remembers what requires work. Learning something that slightly overwhelms you forces attention, and attention activates memory. This is why difficult learning keeps the brain young. It prevents mental shrinkage. The brain, like muscle, follows a simple rule. Use it or lose it. If your learning never stretches you, your brain has no reason to adapt. And when adaptation stops, decline begins. This is why people often say, I don't feel as sharp as I used to. It's not because they can't learn anymore. It's because they stopped challenging themselves. They repeat what they already know. They stay inside familiar territory. Familiarity feels efficient, but efficiency is the enemy of growth. A young brain is inefficient by design. It explores, it struggles, it makes mistakes, and mistakes are critical. Every mistake strengthens learning pathways. Every correction deepens understanding. This is why learning a new language, instrument, or complex skill is one of the most powerful ways to keep the brain young. Not because you'll master it, but because you'll struggle with it. That struggle is mental exercise, and it protects your brain from stagnation. But here's a crucial distinction. Learning doesn't mean multitasking. Watching something while distracted doesn't count. True learning requires presence, single focus, no shortcuts. Even 20 minutes a day of deep learning is enough to signal the brain, we are still growing. That signal changes everything. Memory sharpens, focus improves, confidence rises, because the brain feels useful again. So ask yourself an honest question. When was the last time you learned something that made you feel slightly uncomfortable? If it's been a while, your brain is asking for more, not more entertainment, more challenge. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what quietly destroys learning faster than anything else. Autopilot, because even a curious, moving, learning brain can grow old if awareness disappears. Habit 4. Break autopilot and embrace novelty. How awareness keeps the brain young. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Marcel Proust. Learning challenges the brain, but learning only works when awareness is present. And this is where most people fail. They live on autopilot. Autopilot is when life feels familiar, predictable, efficient. You wake up, you move through the day, you react without thinking, and the brain quietly disengages. Autopilot is not relaxation. Neurologically, it's decay. When you repeat the same behaviors, take the same routes, think the same thoughts, your brain stops paying attention. Attention is expensive. The brain saves energy wherever it can, so it automates, but automation comes at a cost. When attention disappears, learning stops. When learning stops, neural connections weaken, and when connections weaken, the brain ages, not suddenly, silently. This is why days on autopilot blur together. You can't remember details. Time feels faster. Life feels flatter. That's not because life is boring. It's because your brain is asleep. A young brain is an awake brain. Awareness keeps neurons firing. Novelty forces attention, and attention preserves youth. This doesn't mean chasing constant stimulation. That exhausts the brain. Novelty is subtle. It's changing perspective, changing sequence, changing focus. Small disruptions wake the brain up, taking a different route. Eating without distraction, brushing your teeth with your opposite hand. These are not tricks. They are signals. They tell the brain, this moment matters. And when moments matter, memory forms. That's why people often remember unusual days vividly. The brain records what breaks routine. Routine without awareness gets erased. Here's the deeper danger of autopilot. It doesn't just dull memory, it weakens emotional regulation. When you're unaware, you react instead of respond. Stress spikes faster, patience disappears, and chronic stress accelerates mental aging. Awareness creates space between stimulus and response. That space protects the brain. It reduces emotional overload. It preserves energy, and energy is youth. Most people think mindfulness is abstract. It's not, it's neurological maintenance. The brain requires novelty and attention to stay flexible. Without them, it hardens. This is why awareness-based practices have such powerful effects on cognition. They don't calm the mind by magic. They return attention to the present, and presence activates the brain. So how do you break autopilot daily? You slow down intentionally. You do ordinary things deliberately. You notice sensations instead of rushing past them. Not all day, just enough to remind your brain that life is happening now. Because the brain doesn't age from repetition, it ages from unconscious repetition. In the next chapter, we'll address something even more dangerous. Because even an aware brain can grow old quickly if it's fed the wrong inputs. We'll talk about attention, information, and the mental diet that determines how young your brain stays.
Habit 5. Protect your attention. The mental diet that determines how young your brain stays. Your life is what you pay attention to. William James. By now you've realized something important. Keeping the brain young is not about adding more. It's about protecting what you already have. And nothing shapes your brain more than what you allow into your attention. And attention is not abstract. It is biological. Where attention goes, neural resources follow. This means your brain is physically reshaped by what you repeatedly focus on. And that makes attention the most powerful and most abused resource of the modern mind. Your brain was never designed to process endless information. It was designed to focus deeply on what mattered for survival. But today, survival has been replaced by stimulation, notifications, headlines, short clips, endless opinions. Each one feels small, but together they fragment the brain. Fragmentation doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like mild restlessness, reduced patience, shallow thinking. Over time, it becomes something worse. Mental fatigue, poor memory, emotional volatility, not because your brain is weak, but because it's overfed and undernourished. This is what a poor mental diet looks like. High stimulation, low meaning. Your brain reacts constantly, but reflects rarely. And reflection is where depth is formed. A young brain is not constantly reacting. It is capable of sustained attention. It can stay with one thought, one idea, one moment. That ability is disappearing. Not because of age, but because of constant interruption. Every interruption trains your brain to abandon focus. Over time, deep thinking feels uncomfortable, silence feels heavy, and boredom feels unbearable. But boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the doorway. When stimulation drops, the brain begins to organize itself.
ideas connect, insights emerge. This is why the most creative, sharp minds protect their attention fiercely. They don't consume endlessly. They curate. They understand something most people miss. Not everything deserves access to the mind. Negativity ages the brain faster than complexity. Outrage drains more energy than learning. Noise hardens the nervous system. Meaning softens it. This is where the shift happens. To keep your brain young, you must choose depth over dopamine. Less reaction, more reflection, less noise, more clarity. This doesn't mean isolation. It means intention. You choose what to read slowly, what to listen to fully, what to think about deeply. Even a few protected moments per day change the brain's trajectory, because attention, once fragmented, can be rebuilt, but only through restraint. This is the turning point. Up to now, we've talked about stimulation, curiosity, movement, learning, novelty, but stimulation without recovery breaks the brain, and recovery is where true youth is preserved. In the next chapter, we'll move into the most misunderstood habit of all, sleep. Not as rest, but as repair. Because a brain that never shuts down properly cannot stay young, no matter how motivated it is. Habit 6. Sleep is brain repair. Why a tired mind grows old faster than you think. Sleep is the golden chain that ties health and our bodies together. Thomas Dekker. Most people believe sleep is rest. That belief is costing them their mind. Sleep is not passive. It is not optional. And it is not something you can catch up on. Sleep is active brain repair. Every night, while you're unconscious, your brain goes to work. It cleans itself. It strengthens memory. It stabilizes emotion. And when sleep is shortened, delayed, or fragmented, that work remains unfinished. The damage doesn't show immediately. That's what makes it dangerous. A tired brain still functions, but it functions at a cost. Reaction replaces reflection. Impulse replaces patience. Fog replaces clarity. Over time, this becomes the new normal. And once it feels normal, people stop questioning it. They say things like, I just don't feel as sharp anymore. My memory isn't what it used to be. I'm always mentally tired. They assume it's age. It's not. It's sleep debt. A brain that doesn't sleep deeply cannot form strong memories. This is because memory consolidation happens during sleep. Information learned during the day is stabilized at night. When sleep is cut short, learning leaks away. This is why you can work harder and still feel mentally behind. Your brain never finishes processing, but memory is only part of it. Sleep also regulates emotion. Without enough sleep, the emotional centers of the brain become overactive. Small problems feel heavy, minor stress feels overwhelming, and chronic emotional strain accelerates mental aging. A brain stuck in constant alert mode burns through its resources. This is why sleep-deprived people often feel mentally older than they are. Their nervous system is exhausted. there is something even more critical happening. During deep sleep, the brain clears toxic waste. Proteins linked to cognitive decline are flushed out. This is not metaphor. This is maintenance. When sleep is consistently sacrificed, those toxins accumulate slowly, silently, and once they build up, clarity becomes harder to recover. This is why no supplement, no motivation, no productivity system can replace sleep. You cannot outwork biology. But here's the truth. People resist. Protecting sleep requires sacrifice. It means saying no to stimulation at night, no to endless scrolling, no to borrowed alertness. It means respecting limits, and limits are uncomfortable. In a culture that glorifies exhaustion, but a young brain respects rhythm, wake, engage, recover. Without recovery, engagement becomes erosion. So if you want to keep your brain young, stop treating sleep like a luxury. Treat it like a responsibility. Because every night you shortchange sleep, you're borrowing against your future clarity. And clarity, once lost, is hard to reclaim. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper still, because even a well-rested brain can age rapidly if it's constantly flooded with emotional chaos. We'll talk about emotional regulation and why calm is not weakness, but one of the strongest protections your brain has.
Habit 7, emotional regulation. Why calm is the highest form of brain youth.
Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Viktor Frankl, a rested brain can still grow old, not from lack of sleep, but from emotional chaos. Most people underestimate this. They think emotions are psychological, personal, temporary, but emotions are neurological events. Every emotional spike is a chemical reaction in the brain. Stress hormones surge, heart rate rises, attention narrows. This response evolved for short-term survival, but modern life keeps it permanently switched on. A brain that never fully relaxes ages rapidly. Chronic emotional reactivity is one of the fastest ways to exhaust neural resources. You see it in people who are constantly tense. Their thoughts race. Their patience is thin. Their memory is unreliable, not because they're incapable, but because their nervous system is overloaded. A brain in constant defense mode has no energy left for growth. This is why emotional regulation is not self-help. It's neurological preservation. Calm is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to experience emotion without being consumed by it. This distinction matters. A reactive brain burns energy fast. A regulated brain conserves it. And energy conserved is youth preserved. Here's something most people miss. It's not big stress that damages the brain most. It's constant low-grade irritation, the endless reacting, the silent resentment, the mental replaying. Each reaction seems small, but together they create chronic inflammation in the brain. Inflammation disrupts memory, impairs focus, accelerates decline. This is why some people age mentally faster, even when their lifestyle looks healthy. Their inner world is always at war. A young brain has space. space between thought and action, space between feeling and reaction. That space is created through regulation, through breathing, through slowing down, through learning to pause, not suppress, pause. Suppression traps emotion inside the nervous system. Regulation lets it pass through. This is why practices like mindfulness, journaling, and reflection are so powerful. They don't make you passive. They retrain the brain to stay present under pressure, and presence is protective. When you can sit with discomfort without reacting immediately, your brain stays flexible. Flexibility is youth. This is the deeper truth. A calm brain is not a weak brain. It is a brain that has learned. It does not need to panic to survive. That lesson alone extends mental life. In the next chapter, we'll move even deeper, beyond regulation, into something rarer, deep thinking. Because even a calm brain can grow shallow. And shallow thinking over time leads to a shallow life. Habit 8, deep thinking in a shallow world. Why depth keeps the brain alive. The unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates. By now you've noticed a pattern. The brain does not age all at once. It thins quietly, gradually, not because it stops working, but because it stops going deep. In a world optimized for speed, depth has become rare. Information is everywhere. Understanding is not. We skim, we react, we move on. And the brain adapts to that rhythm. It learns to process quickly, but not thoroughly. Over time, this changes how we think. Thoughts become shorter. Attention becomes fragile. Reflection feels uncomfortable. This is not because the brain is weak. It's because it has been trained to stay on the surface. A young brain is not defined by how fast it processes information. It is defined by how deeply it can hold a thought. Depth requires stillness. Stillness requires tolerance, and tolerance is disappearing. Most people are rarely alone with their thoughts. Silence feels awkward. Unfilled time feels wasteful. So the brain never settles. It jumps from input to input, never integrating what it receives. And integration is where meaning forms. Without meaning, the brain loses orientation. A young brain thinks independently. It questions, it weighs, it revisits. This requires space. Space from noise. Space from constant stimulation. Space to sit with unresolved thoughts. This is why deep thinking yet often feels uncomfortable at first. You are not used to holding one idea long enough to let it unfold. But when you do, something shifts. Thoughts become richer. Connections emerge. Insight replaces noise. This is not abstract philosophy. This is structural brain health. Neural networks strengthen when ideas are revisited from multiple angles. Reflection reinforces memory. Contemplation stabilizes emotion. And stability preserves youth. So how do you practice deep thinking in a shallow world? You protect time, not large amounts. Small intentional pockets, time without input, time without agenda, You choose one idea and stay with it. You write, you walk, you let the mind wander without escape. This is not boredom. This is integration. And integration is what the brain craves. After years of fragmentation, over time, this practice rewires how you think. You become less reactive, more discerning, more internally anchored. Your brain stops chasing stimulation and starts creating meaning. And meaning is what keeps the brain alive when novelty fades. This is why many people fear silence. Silence reveals what has been avoided, but facing that is not decay, it is renewal. Habit 9, purpose, the final anchor that keeps the brain young. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Friedrich Nietzsche. If you strip everything down, past habits, routines, techniques, and systems, one truth remains. The brain does not stay young just because it is stimulated. It stays young because it knows why it exists. A brain without purpose can still move, still learn, still react, but it will not endure. Because endurance requires meaning. Purpose is not motivation. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. Purpose is structural. It gives the brain orientation. When the brain knows what matters, it organizes itself around that. Attention sharpens, energy stabilizes, resilience increases. This is why people with a clear sense of purpose often appear mentally strong, even under pressure. They are not less stressed, they are less fragmented. Fragmentation is what ages the brain, pulling in too many directions, caring about everything, anchored to nothing. Purpose simplifies. It tells the brain what to keep and what to let go. Without purpose, the brain drifts. Drifting looks like distraction. It looks like restlessness. It looks like mental fatigue without a clear cause. But underneath, it is disorientation. The brain is asking a question. It never gets an answer to, why does this matter? When that question remains unresolved, effort feels heavier. Learning feels pointless. Movement feels mechanical. Even rest feels unfulfilling. Because there is no context. Purpose provides context. It connects effort to meaning, and meaning preserves youth. This is why many people experience mental decline. Not after hardship, but after comfort. When survival is handled and direction is lost, the brain relaxes too much. Not into peace, but into emptiness. A young brain needs a reason to stay engaged. Not frantic, engaged. Purpose does not need to be grand. It does not need to impress anyone. It only needs to be real. Raising someone well, building something meaningful, understanding the world more deeply, living with integrity. When purpose is present, the brain tolerates discomfort better. Stress becomes information, not threat. Challenges become feedback, not failure. This reframing protects neural circuits that would otherwise be damaged by chronic stress. Purpose changes how the brain interprets difficulty, and interpretation determines impact. Here is the final connection. Every habit you've heard in this journey serves purpose. Curiosity keeps purpose alive. Movement gives it energy. Learning sharpens it. Awareness protects it. Attention deepens it. Sleep restores it. Emotional regulation stabilizes it. Deep thinking refines it. But purpose is the axis. Without it, the system collapses.
If this story helped you think, helped you feel, and helped you practice English, subscribe to Listen Between the Lines. More real stories, more clear English, more meaning in every word. Thank you for listening. Take one small action today. I'll see you in the next story. Stay strong.